I'm Dr. Ryan Fuller, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to control anger with deep breathing. So anger is an emotion that has high levels of arousal associated with it. In fact, anger is one of two emotions that really go along with the fight or flight stress response. So in the case of a crisis or a danger, our sympathetic nervous system, that's part of the autonomic nervous system, goes into motion, increasing respiration, increasing heart rate, driving up blood pressure, releasing glucose into the limbs so there's energy. All these things are really about speeding things up so that the organism, or the human in this case, is prepared for fighting or fleeing. Now, with that said, when we're really angry and we're aroused in those ways, one good way to modulate or change the anger experience is in fact to change our physiology. And there are different ways to go about that. So in using relaxation techniques, one form is progressive muscle relaxation, and that doesn't have to do with breathing techniques, but we're going to talk today about breathing as a form of relaxation, which makes sense in the case of anger management, because as I just said, anger has high levels of arousal in terms of physiological activation. And the research in anger management techniques has shown that relaxation skills alone are highly effective at helping people to manage their anger. So one of the skills that I like using with breath work is very simple and easy to remember, and there's scientific research to show that it really does a good job of helping to tamp down the sympathetic nervous system activity. And so it's really slowing respiration, and it's looking at a 4-7-8 ratio. What that means is we're going to have clients inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, and then exhale for a count of 8. Now, what's important to know is, one, anytime you're trying a technique like this, you do want to make sure you've spoken to your physician and to make sure there's no contraindications based on any health risk factors you have around asthma or a heart condition. But typically what I find is after my clients have spoken with a physician, most physicians are highly encouraging of this kind of relaxation activity. The other important thing to keep in mind is it's the ratio that matters the most. We don't want people to think they've got to count for 4 seconds, 7 seconds, and 8 seconds, or get a very long count and they end up passing out or straining themselves. You really want to just find the amount of time that works for you, but to try to keep the ratio close to 4, 7, and 8. The main thing is that the exhale becomes much longer than the inhale. So I'll give a quick demonstration. It's not perfectly necessary that you have to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, but that's generally the way I teach it. So the client is going to inhale to a count of about 4, hold for a count of about 7, and then exhale from the mouth to a count of about 8. So it would look like this. Inhale, hold, and then exhale. And sometimes I have them exhale from pursed lips. So even though it's a very simple, easy to use breathing exercise, if you do that a number of times, say you do 5 to 10 rounds, you'll likely experience a relaxation response. And oftentimes, especially if I have clients who are somewhat skeptical, I ask them to take their pulse beforehand, especially if they're kind of worked up, to practice the response and then take their pulse again. Again, you want to speak to your healthcare provider, your physician or otherwise, and you don't want to do it if you're driving or something like that. But if you practice it first with a professional and then on your own, it's something that might really help you to reduce an intense physiological, especially if it's an anger response. Anger is a negative feeling, and when it comes in frequencies and intensities and durations that are in the normal range, it can be quite healthy. Unfortunately, when it becomes really intense or really frequent and is paired with behaviors that are problematic, if they're aggressive or uncooperative, they can cause big problems and people can run into having anger management issues. From a physiological standpoint, it activates our body to prepare us for dealing with a threat. So what that means is, like the fight or flight response, it engages the sympathetic nervous system. And what that's really doing is preparing our body to handle a physical threat. So glucose energy is going to be pumped into the arms and legs so that in the case of anger, we're prepared to fight off a potential predator or a rival in our tribe. Our pupils are going to dilate, which is going to allow in more light and allow us to scan for threats that are potential dangers to the organism. So when anger is used in that way and it's fairly short, it's quite healthy. But in our society, oftentimes we're having that kind of a response to threats that might be a threat to our ego, or from just simple frustration if we're in a traffic jam. And when that's the case, that kind of physiological response doesn't really get any kind of release, and we often have to suppress it, and it can cause all kinds of physical health implications. So there are a number of different anger theorists who have talked about different kinds of anger styles, but the one I'll mention breaks anger styles into three forms of expression. So there's anger out, and anger out typically looks like the kinds of behaviors we see with someone that we consider to have a temper. So they become very angry, and then they're going to be doing things like yelling. They may be using profanity. They may smash cell phones or pound their fist on a desk or something along those lines, destroy property. A single anger out episode, in fact, can even cause a heart attack. So that anger expression style does have some risks. It also has interpersonal consequences, as you can imagine. If this is your employer or employee, this is going to cause problems in the workplace. But likewise, an anger in style, where the person is more typically experiencing high levels of anger, but they're not expressing them outwardly. So this person, it may not be clear to those around them that they're actually very, very angry, but they're having an internal experience, usually of high levels of rumination is what I see in my practice, where they're stewing about it and they're not engaging or dealing in active problem solving. That too has physical implications and is correlated with things like gastrointestinal problems, and there's even some evidence that it might be linked to some forms of cancer. Finally, anger control is the expression style in my practice is what we're trying to teach clients. And that's where we're really looking to have them do a few different things. One, they're going to begin to change their thinking about things, both how they're perceiving situations in the first place, what they're attributing the cause to, and then thinking about the practical implications and consequences of their actions. By doing so, they're hopefully going to bring down the level of anger in the first place. They'll also use relaxation to bring down the level of anger, and then they're going to actively engage in problem solving and assertively communicate what's going on for them. So they might share their feelings. They might share what they propose could make the situation better. And that's really the kind of expression style we're looking for when we're dealing with anger management. Frequently when we talk about anger, we're really talking about the emotional experience of an anger phenomenon. But with that, there are also certain action tendencies and behaviors that go along with it. The most obvious, of course, are sort of aggressive anger. And really, aggression is the behavior that frequently accompanies anger, and it usually has an intention to harm another individual. So this could be very direct. It could be in the form of physical assault. It could be in the form of property damage or something like that. There are also forms that are even more indirect and might even be relational. And sometimes people talk about passive anger or passive aggression and things of that nature, where I might be spreading rumors about someone at work or simply saying negative things about them behind their back. Again, I might expect that that's going to eventually do them harm, but it's more passive or indirect, and it's not a specific physical threat. Hi, I'm Dr. Ryan Fuller, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some anger techniques you can use when dealing with a romantic partner, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse. So the first thing is there are some advantages when the anger actually is coming from someone you know and someone who wants you to decrease your anger. The first is, and I recommend this to lots of clients, that you contract with the partner ahead of time what you're going to do when you begin to notice that you're becoming stressed or angry, and that he or she is aware of what you're going to do when that takes place to calm yourself down. That allows him or her to be able to make space for you to check out. And so what I typically have them do is they'll call a timeout, and they'll signal that in a way that works for the two of them. It doesn't matter if it's a hand signal or a particular word, or they can just say timeout. And then there has to be some pre-negotiated idea about when they're going to revisit the topic or the situation at hand, so that the partner doesn't think that this person's avoiding it forever, but rather they're allowing the boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse to step out and in fact bring their anger down, so that when he or she returns, there can be sort of respectful, effective communication and problem solving. The second tool that's very useful and is an advantage that couples can use instead of when you're dealing with anger coming from a stranger is I recommend weekly meetings. I typically have them call it a steering meeting, where on a regular basis we can kind of sit down and go over what's been going well and what's been particularly difficult or might lead to an anger issue. What that does is it allows both parties to recognize there's a time and place to discuss things that are bothering them, and we don't allow things to build up and fester, and where resentments can grow and eventually distance can occur between the couple. So those are two techniques that I think work very well with couples, and I recommend that if you're having a problem with your boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse, you certainly talk to a professional, but the main thing is that you slow things down, figure out what it is you want, and together try to work through it.